Tom doesn't do really well at reading.
Actually, you must read if you're.
Or we kick you out.
It's my coffee.
Yeah, I know. I need to find some glasses too.
Oh, I left it.
I did. I've given some.
All right, folks, as you can see on the screen there, so this is because Anthony already started, am I in camera? The ball rolling with, what was it he did? He did a sort of mishmash.
Matthew 24.
Right.
Mark 13. Luke 21.
Right. Now, okay, so you see on the screen there, historicism or classical futurism. I was just saying to Tom, I should have just titled this, are the prophecies past or future? But basically, historicism, we'll explain as we go. Classical futurism, it's classical because that's basically what the posture of the church was for the first at least 500 years. They regarded the prophecies of Daniel and Jesus as future. So that was the posture, that was the position of, Origen, Tertullian, and all those boys for the first 500 years. But then a guy called Thomas Aquinas sort of came up with this sort of thing that developed into historicism or preterism, but I'm not going to talk about preterism. They share elements. But so you see a picture there of I found on the YouTube. I should have cited the video, but it was a short video explaining the three positions, and I don't know if you can see it there, but that's the statue from the dream of Daniel. Sorry?
It's not coming through on me.
The image is not on the.
Okay.
It is now? Okay. Do you want to explain?
It's sideways, but it's there.
The bunny slippers?
Yeah, so preterism I'm not going to talk about today. It just shares elements with historicism. So they both, historicism and preterism, are theories that the element they share is that the prophecies we're going to look into in Daniel 9 to 12, chapters 9 to 12, and Jesus' Olivet, this prophecy in Matthew 24 are past. They already happened. So the first one is futurism, which is hopefully most of us are futurists. So you have the statue there, and there's a big gap, and then the feet, because the end of all the visions will be joined, that statue, obviously. You have historicism, which is basically a continuous prophecy being fulfilled, even as we speak. And then preterism has the bunny shoes because everything's gone. The second coming's gone, the resurrection has happened, and it's all great, and it's all fluffy and nice, and the kingdom is spreading, the kingdom of God. So many people unfortunately believe that the kingdom is already here, that the resurrection of the dead is sort of a metaphor for just spiritual goodness and rebirth and things like that. So anyway, so we'll go and look at historicism or classical futurism. Now, first of all, the historicist view is a Protestant thing, by the way. I always forget. It's the Reformers. So you're talking Martin, what's his face? Martin Luther.
Mm-hmm.
The other guy, the murderer, John Calvin, serial killer, and all those boys, they were attracted by this historicist view because they read the Catholic Roman Church into the prophecies. So the prophecies, especially of Revelation, the beast, the Antichrist becomes the Pope. The whole evil structure becomes the Catholic Church. And it's natural. It was natural for them to think that. Why? Because they're coming out of the Catholic Church. So they read all those prophecies, especially Revelation, which I'm not gonna go into too much today. We'll just focus on Daniel 9 to 12 and Matthew 24, or else we'll be here all month. Yeah, so they read all those things and into the church, especially the Pope. So the Pope becomes the beast, the Pope becomes the Antichrist, and the whole system is really, and they're the kingdom. They, the Protestants, the Reformers, they're saying to themselves, oh, we're bringing the kingdom. We're the ones, you know, shedding light on the world. So that's the sort of modern understanding of historicism. But then I found this from, is this in your notes? So I handed out a paper with some notes. What's the first quote there? Valerie, can you see the first quote?
Tendencies in Jewish.
Yes, Genesis. Can you read that first quote for us?
The tendencies in Jewish circles to see the 70 weeks fulfilled in Jerusalem. Destruction in AD 70 is even more strongly affirmed in the Jewish chronological work. Seder Olam
Rabbi, yeah, that's good.
CAD 160, the chronology, I'm sorry.
It's the
Spouse.
spouse.
Therein became commonly accepted in subsequent Jewish writings, including the Talmud and the consensus of Jewish rabbinical scholars.
Yeah, so this is from
Why don't you explain what was just said there?
yeah, and this is from an article by Tanner, is Daniel 70 Weeks Prophecy Messianic ? From the publication known as the Biblioteca Sacra, the Sacred Library. Basically, it's a Jewish heresy. The Jews in this work mentioned, this work Seder Olam Rabbah, which is AD 160, that's pretty early, right? That's 2nd century. They pretty much become the first historicists, the first people to read all the prophecies of Daniel. You know, they're not Christians, they're Old Testament Jews. So they're the first ones who start reading Daniel as past. Why? Because if you look at the date, 160 is important. So the temple's destroyed in 70 AD. And then there was a guy in the 140s, 150s, Bar Kokhba, who was a Jewish leader. And he mounted a big battle against the Roman state. And he got crushed. And that guy called himself the Messiah. Bar Kokhba was his name. So after he gets crushed, can you imagine yourself as a Jew? You're totally despondent. You're totally depressed. My temple's gone. The guy I thought was Messiah is gone. So the Jews, according to this, start reading all the prophecies about the kingdom, about the restoration of the Jewish state, as past. So it makes sense why they become historicists. So that was basically the big find.
So they're saying, this guy says here that the people, the Jewish folks, believe that the whole 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel was fulfilled.
Right.
Everything mentioned there was fulfilled when the temple was destroyed.
Yeah. So they're
87.
reading. Yep. So they're becoming what.
They have 70 weeks. They got the last week.
Exactly.
They got the whole.
The Messiah's gone. The kingdom is pretty much gone. I mean, it's a pretty dark period for the Jewish people, right? So
I guess it's understandable.
Oh,
When
yeah.
their whole world was turned upside down, for them
Yeah.
to think that was the end of everything.
exactly. So that's an interesting thing. So it's not so much the Protestants, the Reformers. They really pick up on of this Jewish heresy in the 1500s because they hate the Catholics so much that they read a lot of the Daniel prophecies on the Catholic Church. All right, so the next slide. What did Daniel the prophet say? So let's go to, if you got your Bibles with you, let's read through a little bit of Daniel 9. And by a little bit, I mean, let's see, we'll start. So Daniel is...
Sorry, we have to find her Bible.
Oh, that's all right.
No, I mean, it's here somewhere. She's got a broken leg. She can't jump up and go.
So Daniel is really very important because obviously Jesus' whole teaching about the Olivet prophecy is based on Daniel, right? He calls Daniel a prophet, and we'll see where he calls Daniel a prophet. So Daniel is very important to this end of the ages scenario. So the Jews, remember, the Jewish system is very simple, really. You have a present evil age, which has been going on since the fall of Adam. So they call this the present evil age. Paul calls it that in the Corinthians letter. And then you have the age to come. That's pretty much the Jewish view. There's two ages. We're in a evil age right now, but there's an age to come, which is called also the kingdom of God. And that for the Jew means restoring the fortunes of their nation. That means for the Jews that Yahweh, the one God of Israel, will raise up a descendant of their beloved King David, and he will oversee this whole new system in this new age. The new age also has ramifications for creation itself. Creation itself will be renewed in some incredible way. So God will restore things back to Garden of Eden type scenario where even the animals will become friends with animals again. So lions are not going to eat me up, and I can pet them and stuff. So let's go to Daniel, if we're all there. Let's start with verse 20 there. So we'll go 9:20. Sorry. So we'll go around the horn, starting with Sarah, and then go. So let's go from 20, and then we'll read from there.
Now while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God in behalf of the holy mountain of my God,
While I was still speaking in prayer, then the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in a vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness, about the time of the evening offering. 22.
He gave me instructions and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you insight with understanding.
At the beginning of your request, 23, a message went out. I have come to convey it to you, for you are of great value in God's sight. Therefore, consider the message and understand the vision. So this is the vision. Verse 24.
77s have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place.
So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah, the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in the times of distress.
26.
Sorry,
Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off, and have nothing, and the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with the flood, even to the end. There will be war, desolations are determined.
Actually, there it should be his end. Some translations get that. That's a mistranslation. His end will come quickly or speedily. And then the last verse 27, he, you see why it's his end? He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of that week he will bring sacrifices and offerings to a halt. On the wing of abominations will come one who destroys until the decreed end is poured out on the one who destroys. Now, I'm not going to go into the chronology of this too much. By that I mean I'm not going to go into the specifics of 77s. But first I want to make a couple of points about verses 24 to 27 specifically. So a couple of things stand out. So what I'm doing here, I'm presenting why we're classical futurists, why we believe all this still is to come, and why it has not happened already. So in doing that, I just want to point out a couple of things about the passage of verses 24 to 27. First, the end of transgression or rebellion it talks about. To me, that sounds like disobedience. Okay, so that will come to an end. Okay, there will be, it says, an end to sin or sins.
What verse is that?
24.
24.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at verses 24 to
Finish
27.
To finish the transgression.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I have a footnote. Or to restrain, it says.
Mm-hmm.
So like restrain from transgressing. That's
Right,
what
right.
it
But
says.
to me, I'm given in my interpretation of we're going to stop being disobedient to God.
Well, especially when it says make an end of sin, right?
Right.
After that. It kind
Sounds pretty fun.
of gets a little more explicit there.
And-
Make an end of sin. I mean,
Right.
just think about that for a second. There will be no sin.
Right.
Nobody will
And then
transgress
to
the law.
bring in everlasting righteousness or righteousness of the age. I don't
Now-
think it's now.
Now, the end of sins also, to me, is the end of death. Because death is a product of what? The wages of sin is death. So if there's an end of sins, I'm reading into this now, that's immortality. That's to do with, there's no more sin, there's no more death. To bringing everlasting righteousness. To me, that sounds like also the ages. Remember the culmination of all the age is coming. And of course, this means the fulfillment of all prophetic vision, the grand and central goal of God's plan for humanity and the ages. So that's all, folks, like, that it's pretty huge, right? So these events, the events of this sequence, brings about extraordinary things. Things that clearly, like I was telling Tom, if you're a historicist or a preterist of all things, if you think all this has happened, if you think all those points I just made based on this scripture has been fulfilled somehow, some way, then you're going to have to explain a lot of stuff, like Tom was saying, you were talking about an event that just happened, Tom? Tragic event
The
that just,
terrorist attack?
was it Barcelona or something? Anyway, things like that should not be happening.
They want to know what translation you're reading from.
The quotes I'm giving, transgression.
What translation are you reading from? I'm reading from the New American Standard.
Right, I'm not reading from any translation. I'm just making points about what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'll just tell them our basic one that most of us like is the New American Standard.
Yeah, in terms of translation, folks, that was New American?
Mine's an NASB, which I told her already.
Yeah,
A new person that's asking that.
Right, well, verse 26 I heard gets it wrong. When it says its end, should be his end.
Right.
So look for another translation. And don't believe anything I say, by the way. Check it out.
So his end will come with a flood.
Yes, it should be his
His
end.
end.
Some mistranslate that. And it
It
makes
doesn't
sense.
mean
'cause-
he will necessarily drown in the flood. It just means when he is ended, in whatever way he's killed, there will be a flood.
the point,
It's not a literal flood. It means a flood of judgment. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
His
really?
end will come
I was
suddenly.
wondering, because I never heard about a flood before.
Right,
So
right.
I'm like, what? Where's this
No,
flood?
it's not a literal flood.
But my
Wow.
point with the
Yeah.
it's and the his is that it's an individual. See, the
If
it's.
you look
it-
in your, I'm sorry,
Please.
jump in, but
Oh.
if you have a New American Standard Bible,
Mhm.
verse 26, it does have in the margin,
I
it
know.
has his
It has the real.
rather than
Translation.
its.
The
So
point is
well,
it's
just
an
to say that you're
individual.
not just making this up. It's
Mhm.
somebody who translated the
Right.
Bible thought that's what it meant too.
Like we always say, don't
Him
believe the
being
preacher.
Christ.
Check it out for yourself. And so those are very huge declarations there in this vision. Now let's move to Matthew 24.
Sorry, so I'm going to ask you one more question about that.
Yeah.
It says in verse 26, after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off.
Mm-hmm.
The Messiah, that's Jesus,
Yeah, traditionally it's believed to be
will be cut off.
the Messiah, the with
That's
the
the
article.
death of Messiah.
Yeah. The
Are
Messiah.
you talking about at the time of his birth and death?
Right. So
It's
Yeah.
some of
not,
this,
not
some
at
of this
his,
is past. Yes.
not at his second. No, so that is definitely past.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city. So who's the prince who is to come?
Antichrist.
That's not the guy that destroyed Jerusalem, Antiochus Epiphanes.
We'll get to
Okay.
that.
So, but what we think that is that is the
Yeah.
Antichrist in the
Yeah.
future.
Mm-hmm.
Again, what I'm focused more on is really verse 24. If those things have happened, the end of transgression, an end to sins, everlasting righteousness, the fulfillment of everything, basically. That's really my focus right now, and we'll get to those things about 26
Okay.
and 27.
Alright.
But we'll go step by step, so I won't lose even
No, that's
myself.
fine. I didn't know you were covering it. It was here, and I.
Okay. Let's go to Matthew 24. So this is very important to Matthew 24. So what did Jesus say now? So we know that the answer is always Jesus. The the story about the kid in the classroom with the rabbit or something. The kid says, "Oh, it was Jesus" or something. Anyway. All right. So let's see. We shall read from. Let's see. So Anthony went through this. I'm not going to go through the whole chapter, but basically Jesus is asked the question of when is the kingdom coming. Pretty much that's a question.
And what are the signs of the ends of the age?
Right. So what's the sign that the kingdom is coming? The end of the age. Again, the end of the age equals the kingdom of God on earth. That's what I'm adding to this. So what is the end of the age? I.e., I'm a Jew. I'm waiting for us to take control again, right? And you're coming. So he's the Messiah. The kingdom cannot come without the king, right? You need a king for the kingdom to come. So they're very invested. They're very involved, these Jewish disciples of Jesus, in that one event with those two elements. The end of the age, the kingdom, and you, the king. When's this going to happen? So that's the question. And then Jesus goes on about the destruction of the temple. He points out that because they're all, wow, look how great, like this house, look how great this house is. Look at the beautiful staircase and so on. Jesus goes, well, that's going to get torn down. And they're like, what? So the point here is that the end of the age, which is the establishment of the kingdom, is connected to the destruction of the temple. Now, I don't know if that was an Old Testament teaching already, Tom or Michelle, that the temple, that the coming kingdom was connected to the destruction of the temple, the Jewish temple. It was in Daniel, right? In Daniel it was, but I'm saying that the Jews, I don't know how they tied those two things, but it sounds from the apostles here that they're not very clear that the destruction of the temple is tied to the coming of the kingdom. Although it is in Daniel, as Sarah was saying.
Well, Jesus does say not one stone. He
Right.
shows them stones.
Yeah.
Not one stone of this, glorious, fabulous temple will be left
Mhm.
on top of
Until
each other.
these things are fulfilled.
Yeah.
And then Jesus goes on to talk about signs, things that precede this great event. So, very bad. Remember Anthony's teaching always about the prophet. The prophetic word is always very, very bad. It's very dark, very depressing. But then we got help coming. That's pretty much what the prophets always, and that's pretty much Jesus, because he is the prophet, right? So he goes into this whole thing about what I call natural disasters, earthquakes, and very horrible things, pestilence, death. And then he even brings in cosmic things. The heavens will tremble and you'll see things in the sky. I mean, this is a worldwide event, it sounds like to me, by the way. Not just in Israel or in Palestine area. And then obviously persecution, more persecution. So let's start reading, Sarah, from verse 15, and we'll go through this a little bit.
Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand.
16.
Okay, I'm in Anthony's translation now. Then the people living in Judea should escape to the mountains.
17.
Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get the things out that are in his house.
And the one in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. 19.
But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days.
Pray that you do not have to run away in winter or on the Sabbath day.
For then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will.
Or ever will happen. That's a key verse right there. So there's going to be the great tribulation from the beginning of the world until now, says Jesus, or ever will happen. 22. If those days had not...
I'm sorry.
You right?
I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was my turn to read. It's not.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
If those days had not... And this is another key verse, because this touches on this pre-trib, post-rapture, whatever. If those days had not been cut short, no one would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, i.e. you Christians, right? So Christians are going through this.
Anthony's translation has for the sake of the chosen.
Chosen, same deal. We're the chosen. We're the elect. We're the saints. Whatever you want to call us, but don't call me...
Believers.
But don't call me demon. we're all Christians. We'll be cut short. 23, Sarah, please.
Then if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him.
For false messiahs will appear, and false prophets too, and they will perform amazing signs and miracles in order to deceive the chosen, if that were possible.
Note another important verse. So we want to see tongues, we want to see healing, we want to believe in these things, but again, it's not just about signs and wonders. Now I'm speaking to the Pentecostals out there. It's not just about that. You have to also be speaking the words of Jesus in terms of teaching. You have to be a monotheist, a Jewish monotheist, not a Trinitarian, not a Binitarian, not a whatever Arian. So that's important. Signs and wonders are not the be-all and end-all of our faith. So do not be misled, says Jesus. Go on, please, Sir Valerie.
Behold, I have told you in advance.
So then, if someone says to you, look, he is in the wilderness, as in the Messiah, do not go out. Look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe him.
For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be.
Vultures gather where the carcass is.
Sorry, Valerie. 29.
Wherever the corpse is.
Yeah, corpse, carcass.
But immediately after the tribulation of those days,
She doesn't have her big glasses
the
with her.
sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken.
And I'll finish up here.
Yeah.
Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Again, this sign of man.
Which one is it?
And all the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man arriving. They will see. They will see, folks. Not a metaphorical seeing. They will see. They. Who's they? And it's interesting because it's unbelieving people. It's not Christians, the nations. It's talking about the nations there. Or the tribes. The tribes, sorry.
I'm not quite sure.
They will.
It just doesn't sound very secret.
The point is,
Let's
it's
say
not.
that's sort of a point.
The point is, it's not invisible. They see. They will see this Son of Man arriving on the clouds with power and great glory. He will send, the Son of Man, his angels with a loud trumpet blast. They will gather his elect, or the chosen, or the Christians, from the four winds, one end of heaven to the other. Okay, so that's a mouthful right there. So what did Jesus say? So Jesus is saying a lot of things here, but the thing I want to focus is he's echoing Daniel. So verse 15 is important. The abomination of desolation. 24:15.
Okay.
The abomination, and then Jesus calls Daniel what?
Prophet.
Okay, so Antiochus, who was a 2nd century BC, before Christ, figure, he was a king of, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Evil, bad dude.
Bad guy. He had a lot of characteristics of an antichrist and so on. But this figure, to keep it simple, is before Christ. So if Jesus calls Daniel, and note that Jesus calls him out by name. So Daniel wrote the book of Daniel. It wasn't some pseudo, some redactor, some other person, some ghost writer. No, Jesus believes the book of Daniel in your Old Testament was written by Daniel. And guess what? He was a prophet. Okay, so now we'll get rid of a lot of how can I put this, misconceptions out there. That these things and this abomination, which we'll look at, and the Antichrist figure and all this stuff happened before Christ. I think, to keep it simple, Daniel was a prophet to Jesus. And prophet in terms of predictive, because you have two types of prophecy, by the way. Just prophesying as in admonition, teaching, and so on. But obviously here the context of the word prophet is in terms of predicting, right? Future visions and stuff. So we'll get rid of Antiochus. I'm not going to talk about Antiochus. I was, but I'm not. It's interesting that Mark 13:14, which echoes obviously the Jesus saying here, some manuscripts also have the prophet Daniel. Probably in your Bibles you might not have it, but some manuscripts do. So, all right. Sarah? Can you read that quote by Young? So this is Young, The Prophecy of Daniel, a commentary.
It is assumed that when Christ spoke of the abomination of desolation, he had in mind Daniel 9:24-27. Since therefore he regarded the abomination as future, the 70th seven in which the abomination is to occur must also be future.
Is that too? Again, is that too difficult? Now I will break my own word here, if you permit me. I will just mention this about Antiochus. There's an ESV quote there. The next slide.
Next one down.
If you can read it, Michelle, please.
This is under why Antiochus doesn't fit. One striking difference between Antiochus IV Epiphanes and the Antichrist. Okay, this is one striking difference. between Antiochus and the Antichrist lies in the events surrounding the king's death, which does not fit what is known of the death of Antiochus. He met his end during a relatively minor campaign against Persia in 164 BC, not between the sea and Jerusalem after a grand and successful assault on Egypt. When compared to the precision of fulfillment of the previous verses of chapter 11, these verses may be looking for a greater fulfillment that is yet to come at the time of the end. The glorious holy mountain. This is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which perhaps here should be connected to the fall of Antichrist in the Battle of Armageddon in Revelation 16.
Now, I'll just quickly read the verses in question here. So this is Daniel 11, 40 to 45, which most of scholarship admits what the ESV Study Bible here admits, that it must be in fulfillment of something future. So usually what scholars do with pretty much the whole of Daniel is they're historicists. They place everything in the past and usually apply it to this Antiochus figure, who was a second century before Christ figure, who could not fit this role, right? Because Jesus calls Daniel a prophet. At the time of the end, this is Daniel just quickly, 11:40. At the time of the end, the king of the south will attack him. Now, this is usually understood as the king of the north, who is this Antichrist figure. Then the king of the north will storm against the king of the south, etc. He will invade lands, passing through them like a overflowing river. That is a metaphor, like his end coming like a flood. So he will be like an overflowing river. 41, then he will enter the beautiful land. Now the beautiful land, as we know, is the promised land, right? Israel or Palestine at that. Many will fall, this will escape, but some will escape, and then he names who will escape. 42, he, this Antichrist figure, the king of the north, will extend his power against other lands. The land of Egypt will not escape. He, the Antichrist figure, will have control over fortunes and peoples, and they will submit to him. 44, but reports will trouble the king of the north from the east and the north, and he will set out in a tremendous rage to destroy and wipe out many. He, this king of the north, will pitch his royal tents between the seas. Now this is commonly believed to be between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea. So the
land of Judea.
That's very specific, right? Exactly, the land of ancient Judea or ancient Palestine. Toward the holy mount, so further specificity. Is that the word? Specificity.
Specificity. Say that 3 times. Specificity.
So further details, okay? So what's the beautiful or the glorious holy mountain? The Zion is called throughout the Old Testament. But get this,
Jerusalem,
he will come to his end. This is the same as what happened in, was it 927, like a flood?
Mm-hmm.
He will come to his end and no one will help him.
26.
Right. Again,
where are you reading that? It says
Daniel
45.
11:45.
okay,
I just
I'm
read.
sorry, I was typing here. Okay.
All right. So that's all I'll say about Antiochus. I broke my own word, but yeah, suffice it to say that Jesus calls Daniel a prophet, and no figure before Christ, BC times, can fit that role.
Can I just
Question?
read? Milk has one comment that sums it up completely. Jesus sees Daniel's prophecy as still future to him, Jesus, so Antiochus Epiphanes doesn't fit.
Yep,
End of story.
that's what Young, the
No,
Young
Well, that was Milk, no
Quote-
sugar, no
yeah,
cider,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
yes, the same point.
All right, so now let's move
And
quick.
not to mention that at the end of Daniel, he says,
Mhm.
you're going to die, enter into rest, and this is all, you know,
We'll
for
get
the end
to
of the age.
that.
Okay.
We'll get Don't jump ahead.
Didn't know what you were covering. Okay.
Okay, now let's go to Titus. Who was Titus? Titus was a Roman general from what, 66 AD. So now this is after Christ.
Right.
So I'll give you that.
Still future.
So now we're going to focus on this figure. Titus was
So
a Roman.
Jesus is dead.
Mhm.
The
Jesus-
temple has not fallen yet.
No.
In 66.
Right. So Jesus dies around 33, if you want to believe your Christmas stories. 33 AD. And Titus comes 30 years later. So he was a very strong general. He did have very antichrist type charisma to him, if you will.
Tendency.
He never really lost a battle, I don't think. I don't think Titus even lost a battle. Anyway, he was so good that after the events of 70 AD, he becomes emperor. That's how good this guy was. And he was one of the few Roman emperors to die a natural death. Most emperors were either assassinated
Poison.
or poisoned and so on, but this guy. All right, why Titus doesn't fit. Now, I grant you, like I said, he's post-Jesus. Yes, Titus eventually destroyed the temple after besieging the city for what was almost a year. He wiped out a lot of Jews. The Holocaust of that day, which is, some historians place it at 1 million Jews. I think that's overestimating the numbers. But anyway, he pretty much wiped out the whole deal. So he's after Jesus. He did destroy the temple. But there are a lot of holes with Titus, and I got some points here. If you look at Daniel 7:11, can someone read Daniel? Whoever has it first, just read Daniel 7:11, please. So we'll go step by step here. Why Titus does not fit.
7:11. Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire.
Now, it's traditionally agreed that the horn, the beast there, is the Antichrist figure. Okay? So obviously Titus did not meet this end. So the beast and his empire, says that verse, were destroyed. But guess what? The Roman Empire not only continued, but thrived under Titus. And other rulers, under Trajan, another emperor, 30 years after Titus, the empire got to its biggest size. It took over most of Babylon, ancient Persia, and so on. So anyway, the point is it thrived. Nothing came to an end. Another point, if you look at Daniel 9, 26 and 27, which we read, the prince comes. Where do I have these?
Will be cut off and have nothing. Flood.
Right, so this Antichrist figure is killed. Again, I just said Titus was not killed. He actually was one of the few to die a natural death. So he was not cut off. He did not meet his end like a flood, which is a metaphor for speedily, for quickly. None of that happened. Look at verse 26. Titus did not desecrate the holy place. So what does that mean, by the way, desecrate the holy place? Where Antiochus was thought to be that because he got so mad by the Jewish rebellion that was going on, the revolt against his state, that he is said to have put a statue of Zeus, the Greek god Zeus, or Zeus, in the holy place, and that desecrated it. But Titus didn't even do that. Titus just destroyed the whole thing. So that's not a desecration. That's just a destruction. And Titus never, as far as the records show, never placed himself as God or a God or whatever God. You know, like Caligula. I don't know if you know the story about Caligula. He was emperor before Titus. He went a little bit, not that they were in all cycles probably, but, and he started putting up statues of himself as gods. And actually, in the Roman state, in the Roman Empire, there was this rule, which was interesting, that living emperors could not erect statues of themselves as gods until they died. So that was interesting. although they were pagan, they couldn't call themselves God while they were still alive. So that's an interesting prohibition. Look at verse 27 there, Daniel. What's it say? 9:27 again.
He will make a firm covenant with the many for 1/7.
Titus did not do any covenant. Titus besieged the city for months. I think it was 6 months to be accurate. By the way, anyone out there who wants to correct any of my history, which is sketchy. But again, no covenant. You know, Titus didn't come and try to what's the word? Arbitrate? Be an arbitrator? Mediator? Nothing. The guy, Rome said, go destroy these people. They're stubborn. That's it. He just went and raised it. And then look at, we just read it, 1145. His end obviously came much later. So those are just some of the reasons why Titus cannot meet could not fit here. Another thing, the next slide, the abomination, is it a thing or a person? This is why it's important, like I was telling Michelle with translation, that they reflect that it's a he, it's an individual. So Mark 13:14, if you can read that, please. It's on the screen. Just read that and then the quote, please.
But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he should not, let the one reading understand. And then this is a quote from Michelson, interpreting the Bible. Hence, person and thing are intermingled in the imagery. In Matthew, the abomination is described as a thing which stands in a holy place, 24:15. But in Mark, a neuter noun, abomination is modified by a masculine participle. This strange grammatical shift shows that for Mark, the abomination is a person who stands where he ought not to stand. Mark 13:14. The man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians 2 is clearly an individual, the product of the mystery of lawlessness, which is continually operating.
Now let's go on quickly to the next slide, Antiochus or Titus. Now these are a couple of commentaries.
Can I read you though for a second? Just
Yes.
one comment.
Falsely.
It's easy to see once Jesus has spoken to put it into the future. And then this is from Milk, Etienne. A destroyed temple, AD 70, is not the way in which Daniel's prayer in Daniel 9 is destined to be answered.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
So that's
all those things we read about everlasting righteousness, end of sin, those are all good things, right? It's not fulfilled in a destruction of the temple, which is a horrible, terrible thing.
Yeah.
I don't see how that's everlasting righteousness. I don't see how it's an end of sin.
It certainly wasn't an end of sin. There was a whole lot more, sin, persecution, a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah.
Let's go to those quotes there. Michelle, can you read the
One that says
Antiochus or Titus, the first one?
Okay. It is important to observe that Matthew 24:15 conclusively proves that Jesus himself regarded the fulfillment of the prophecy in Daniel as yet future. This means that a genuine theological or doctrinal issue is at stake here. For if the hypothesis of complete fulfillment by Antiochus is correct, as many liberals insist, it raises a real question as to whether Jesus was mistaken in his understanding of prophecy and the theological interpretations of the Old Testament.
And by the way, some are honest in saying that Daniel did get it wrong. I just read one blog where the person said, yeah, he was wrong, and then he corrected himself. So,
Really?
look, if you want
What book is that? The book of Daniel 2? Son of Daniel, Daniel.
And many liberals, unfortunately, many commentators, unfortunately, are liberals when it comes to this topic. And just quickly,
theological liberals here we're talking about, not necessarily political ones.
Sarah, can you do the Kyle? Is it Kyle?
The reference of this prophecy to the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans is not thereby proved, because in his discourse Christ spoke not only of this destruction of the ancient Jerusalem, but generally of his parousia and the end of the age, Matthew 24:3, and referred the words of Daniel of the kingdom to the parousia of the Son of Man.
Yeah, parousia, thank you, Michelle. Parousia is the Greek for coming, which is interpreted as second coming, obviously, because it's the second coming of Christ. So it doesn't technically mean second coming, it just means a coming of someone. And it's used as such, by the way, every time that word appears in the New Testament. It means someone is coming. Not invisibly, not metaphorically, whatever. It's
In your
someone
hearts,
comes.
not just in your hearts.
Exactly. And the end of the age. So, again, two elements to the one Jewish view. The kingdom cannot come without a king. And that's basically the question in Matthew 24 posed to Jesus. When is the king bringing the kingdom? To paraphrase what they're asking. That's basically it. Just an addendum here, Sarah, if you can read. The wing of abominations.
Yeah, so can
One
I just
possible.
say,
Yeah.
so the main reason Titus doesn't fit either is because Jesus didn't come back. The kingdom is not happening.
Just.
Right. I'm just saying it
I
in
don't
different
know.
words.
Was it?
Yeah.
Wasn't it clear?
Be real clear, because it says
I don't know. I'm trying to be
Jesus
as
talked
clear as
about
possible.
the destruction of
Right, I'm
Jerusalem.
just
Yeah.
trying to boil it down.
Right.
And the end of the age and the
Right.
coming of
Right.
Jesus. Oh, I just think that's what Matthew 24:3 teaches.
However you want to put it. See, to me personally, the end of the age now, to me, it's easier to look at it as the kingdom of God established on earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's really,
Well, that's
to
the
me,
beginning.
the
The
end
kingdom
of
is
the
the
age.
beginning of the kingdom age.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
The end of the age is the end of this
This age.
Present
system,
evil age.
Mhm.
Right.
system that we're under.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And
A system in which Satan is given free reign to influence our lives
Mhm.
and create destruction and havoc all over the world and
Mhm.
our minds and everything. Whereas in the kingdom, which is really, I mean, when Jesus comes, that's the end of the one, but the beginning of the other.
Exactly.
And it's a system.
Yep.
So when we talk age,
Mm-hmm.
we don't mean the whole planet and the universe all be destroyed. We mean the end of that system that
Right.
we're under, you know,
Mhm.
on earth.
So the wing of abominations, which is another debate out there. Here's a possible.
The
Archer.
phrase that causes desolation, literally a desolator of abominations, bears an interesting resemblance to the abomination that causes desolation, Daniel 11:31, and the abomination that causes desolation, Daniel 12:11, also Matthew 24:15. Significantly, the evangelist inserted the parenthetical exhortation, "Let the reader understand." It is important to observe that this reference conclusively proves that Jesus himself regarded the fulfillment of the prophecy in Daniel as yet future, rather than having been completely realized in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, as the Maccabean date hypothesis supposes.
Yeah, future. It's always future. The reason I'm using that quote as well is because of the reference to Daniel 12. So let's read a little bit of Daniel 12. So this is all, as Michelle alluded to earlier, Daniel 11 and Daniel 12, don't be misled too much about the chapter break. It's one sort of train of thought going on. So 1145 ended with, if you remember, the king of the north, pitching his tent in Jerusalem, in the land, let's call it, toward facing Jerusalem, right, holy mountain. But he will come to his end with no one to help him. At that time, Michael, so it's continuous. So read it as such, you know. It's one continuous vision, right? So Michelle, can you read verse 1, and we'll read a couple of verses.
Now at that time, Michael, the great prince, which we say is an archangel, who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress, such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued.
All right, so again, we have this unheard of time, right, of distress, unprecedented, unlike any other. And then verse 2, many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, some to everlasting life, and others to shame and everlasting abhorrence. Sarah, verse 3.
Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever.
Again, so this is all tied together as those quotes I have there. At that time, Daniel 12:1 from Anderson, Signs and Wonders. The artificial chapter division at this point should not be allowed to obscure the very real connection here between 11:45 and 12:1. The immediate context of Daniel 12, verses 1 to 3, that is the resurrection, right, is clear beyond question, integral to a proper understanding of their significance. So that's Anderson. And again, you got another quote there. So, bottom line is, these events are on top of each other, basically, one after the other. So the wicked king of the north comes to his end. At that time, not at that time past or at that time present, but at that time, what happens? Well, with the coming of the kingdom comes what? The resurrection of the dead. I mean, that's like Sunday School 101, I think. If kids who are brought up in churches, I wasn't brought up in church, but, it's Christianity 101, really, that the resurrection of the dead happens with they would say with the coming of Christ, which is true as well. But obviously Christ is bringing the kingdom. So, any comments?
Daniel 12:2. Many who are sleeping in the dust, like quotes, many who are sleeping in the dust. That quote means that resurrection must be in the future.
Unless,
that's from Bob and Kay.
Unless I'll play devil's advocate. Unless you change the meaning of the resurrection into some metaphorical thing, like liberals do. They say.
Well, I've heard that there were those who were resurrected. There was a resurrection happening when Jesus died, right? Remember?
Right.
Some came back to life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There were people who came back to life.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people tell me that's
in Matthew 25, I think.
But did they come back to physical life on earth, which is what I think they did, or did they shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven?
Doesn't say it.
To everlasting life, and no, I think they just awoke from the dead back to physical people.
Yeah, and later
lived
died.
out their life and then died.
Yeah, it was just a sign that something amazing just happened.
Yeah, it's a big deal to get your attention.
Right. And again, the kingdom wasn't established, was it? Jesus is still in heaven. He's not here. So he hasn't come back. So even if he is that one, that's hard to connect the dots here. I'm trying to connect the dots. But do test, though, what I'm showing you here and what I'm presenting.
Well, so many people, churches, is this read in your church every week? People don't even go study this thing. They think, that Old Testament stuff, all this prophecies, blah, 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 all these books.
Well, Jesus, as Anthony says, Jesus loved Daniel.
Yeah, Jesus quoted all.
Because Daniel is the what's that called? The design. He gives you the design. Jesus is not creating anything new. He's working off God's design given by the prophets before him. He's not creating some new gospel about the kingdom. He's working within the Jewish worldview, which is, again, very simple, present evil age, as Michelle said, and the coming age. Even today, by the way, which is weird, because most practicing Jews are liberals, unfortunately. But even they would use language about the Olam. What are they? What do you call it in the song? Yeah, I was thinking of that song you guys always, of the fiddler, is it on?
Oh, L'chaim. That's
Yeah.
to life, yeah.
Right, to life and all
The
that
life
stuff.
of the age, yeah.
So it's weird because they still use this sort of age language, which is their own language, but they don't really believe it. All right, as we wrap up here, one last thing, not one last thing. Let me talk about the types. Nothing wrong with types. So what do I mean by that? I mean Hitler, someone we can relate to because it was recently. Hitler, I mean, this guy, Holocaust, you say, wow, you know, a lot of Jews were killed. Most
And
so
others,
far.
and others.
And others. War on, World War, I mean, this one person creating all this havoc, so you might go to the Antichrist figure with Hitler. Yes, well, I would say, yes, that's a type. That's God throughout history has, presents types of this figure. So there's nothing wrong with that as long as we see them as what they are, types. Sarah, can you read Mu there? We'll just read these 3 quotes here.
Jesus probably telescopes AD 70 and the end of the age in a manner reminiscent of the prophets, who frequently looked at the end of the age through more immediate historical events.
Michelle Miller there.
Denying religious liberty is characteristic of dictators such as Antiochus, Nero, Domitian, Stalin, Hitler, and others. But the Antichrist will go beyond what anyone has done before in his attempt to create a thoroughly secular world.
Ezekiel there?
While this commentary maintains the Antiochs foreshadowed the little horn spoken in chapter 7, as well as the mysteries figures in 927 and 1136 through 39.
Yeah, all those.
Also asserts that this book of Daniel does not find its ultimate culmination in this historical figure. The figure portrayed in these latter passages far surpass the diabolical deeds of
Antiochus.
Antiochus.
I should have prefaced this, but I am biased when I use quotes, especially when it comes to this topic. Because when you go and do your research, and I hope you do, don't believe anything I have been saying. Please, don't believe me. Valerie, don't believe me. Okay? You check it out. Hopefully you can check these things out and do your own praying and thinking about these things, because this is very serious stuff. We don't want to get this wrong. I don't want to get this wrong. If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Because I do want, as our brother Greg Dybel says, what's the Dybel prayer? If I'm
Deceived, please undeceive.
If I'm deceived, I'm open to being undeceived. So, but I am biased in using the quotes here because most of, again, I repeat, I said this before, most of scholarship on this are liberals. Again, they're historicists. They're people who, it's interesting. I was going to use this at the beginning. I was reading the Wikipedia article on Jesus. I don't know why I like to do that, but I
See what's being said.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was reading, I'll paraphrase, but it said something like, everyone agrees that Jesus existed. Everyone agrees that he was born, he had a ministry, he lived, and he was killed by the orders of Pilate of Rome, right? But then it says, but we don't believe the miracles and the resurrection and the virgin birth.
Wikipedia doesn't?
Right.
Or,
Well,
Yeah.
they're just
or
telling
that
you,
people don't.
like
that people-
scholarship in general, modern consensus, to sort of speak. So it's interesting to me. So they don't deny he existed. They don't deny he had a ministry. He talked about the kingdom. They don't deny he was killed on the cross by a guy called Pilate. But they do deny the miracles and the supernatural events. So my point about that is that I was a historian before I was a believer, or a student of history anyway. And it's interesting how, think about that. So that's picking and choosing. I'll believe what someone wrote about Valerie. Valerie did come from, Tejas, let's say. And she did live and she died somewhere in California, right? But I won't believe other things about Valerie. And the interesting thing about that is that these people, now I'm talking about modern scholarship out there, where are they getting this information from? The same source. The only source, the Gospels. The same source that speaks about the virgin birth, supernatural things like Jesus walking on water, raising the dead, and the big one, Jesus being raised from the dead. So I'm just telling you that as a sort of the mindset of some people.
So when you use the term liberals, because you're using that term as if all of us understand what that term is, and I was going to ask you anyway. So I think that's what you're explaining right now.
When it comes to
That
this,
when you say the term, these things are written down by liberals and liberal, I don't really like terms like that thrown at me about groups of people, because maybe I am liberal about something, but I don't know. I don't know. Am I liberal? Am I this or that? Because I know what I believe, but I don't know. Is that a liberal concept? Is it not? So I don't really know. Have a list of what all the liberals believe. It's not a term that I use. So I guess that's what you're sort of explaining then. Is
when it comes
some
to
of these
this,
liberal people are ones who just believe what you just said, that Jesus historically existed, but they don't believe in what he did.
right?
Basically unbelievers.
Yeah, they kind of stop the story.
Well, they're not an unbeliever if they believe. Complete unbeliever if they don't deny that Jesus at least
Even
was
existed.
born. Yeah,
Right.
existed. So.
Right.
Yeah, there's a slight
It
difference.
stops there.
Now, in that, I just noticed a comment. Sorry,
Mhm.
we did a comment. Said Dan Shaw says, "Careful, I've been called liberal by Orthodox. He was Jewish because I reject conservative orthodoxy."
Oh yeah,
See, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
You can be called a
in the
liberal
eye of the beholder.
when you
Yeah.
don't agree with the Trinity
Jesus is
or
God.
something. You
Mhm.
could be called a liberal. So those labels to me are a little
Mhm.
little fuzzy. And Greg says liberal. Oh my. And then Dan says, I've also been classified as a heretic by a Lutheran. And Hedus, Hedus, he says, weak argument to be honest. Catholics claim many miracles, which I do not believe, but I don't doubt the supposed miracle workers existed. Milk says, that's liberation, Dan. John 8:32. Truth shall set you free. And then Bob and Kay says, our hope for resurrection is the fact that God resurrected Christ from the tomb.
Mhm.
Oh, I think we were talking about resurrection earlier.
Yeah, so liberal in terms of, they accept one aspect of a man's history, but not the other aspect of the man's history. And again, as a historian, it's incredible to me because the only information we have about this person are the Gospels, really. You have some disparate information here and there.
Josephus,
Yeah,
some people, the story.
Pliny's letter to Trajan mentioned, but really the information is there. And guess what? They also talk about virgin birth, miracles, signs and wonders, and the big one, resurrection. But they're liberal in that way. When it comes to prophecy, they're liberal in the similar way, because they don't see this as future. These events, which herald extraordinary things, like the end of sin, which to me is immortality, for some, the church, the elect, the chosen, however you want to call us. Again, they deny that. Obviously, they have to, I guess, to keep within the liberal, that sort of liberal mindset. So it's that. Antichrist figure. The Antichrist figure is a supernatural figure. I mean, he's gonna bring peace to the Middle East. That's pretty supernatural, isn't it? When you see peace, actual peace in the Middle East, that's gonna be a supernatural event to me. So
it's false peace.
it's peace nonetheless for some time. I mean, that's gonna be incredible. Last word, and then we got some time here to kill. Last word. The very last word about this, the thing that strikes me about historicism, about all this stuff being past, or now of all things, is the simple fact that the gospel about the kingdom of God is also about the worldwide conversion or restoration of the nations of the whole world. You know, that's the other thing. And what do I mean by conversion and restoration? I mean that Iran, China, places, countries that we regard as non-Christians, India with their Buddhism, will acknowledge Yahweh, the one God of Israel, and Jesus as his son, the Messiah. That is what conversion and restoration means. That a nation like China, a nation like Iran, or any Muslim nation will come to change their mind and go, wow, we recognize Yahweh, God, the one true God, the God of gods. We read in, what chapter was that? In Daniel 11. The God of gods is Yahweh, the one God of Israel, and his son is Jesus, the promised Messiah. Did that happen? Is that happening? That's the only question you have to ask yourself. Because that's what this is all about. And Sarah just finished with that quote there from the International Critical Commentary.
In the background to Matthew 24:14 is the Old Testament motif of the nation's end-time conversion to Yahweh. Here that conversion heralds the end.
Right, and we'll finish. So 24:14 is?
This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world, and then
the end. What, the end of time? The end of this present evil age will come. Let's finish with Micah, which is really an echo of which psalm was it, 2?
It's Isaiah.
Isaiah 2, which is really Isaiah 2. And Micah, guess what? Micah sounds like Isaiah. Guess what? Because they're probably getting the same supernatural information from the one God of all creation. Sarah, you want to start us up? We'll read the first 5 there, and then we'll wrap this up. Micah 4.
I have to find Micah.
Okay. So, yeah, it comes, where's Micah?
Daniel, Hosea, Joel,
Obadiah.
close there.
Right before Nahum. Micah
Good.
4?
Mm-hmm.
So Sarah will start us off, and we'll go around the horn.
And it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the peoples will stream to it.
Verse 2.
Many nations will come and say, "Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For from Zion will go forth the law, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem."
3.
Verse 3.
And he will judge between many people and render render decisions for mighty distant nations. Then they will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they train for war.
Each nation will sit under his own grapevine, or under his own fig tree, without any fear. The Lord, who commands armies, has decreed it. Last verse. Sorry.
Though all the peoples walk each in the name of his God, as for us, we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever.
Again, did that happen? Is that happening, sir? Yes?
No.
No, none of these things have happened. Okay,
Never
I have a
again
question
will they
about that one.
train for war.
Yeah, no more war. And all the nations of the world saying, come, let us go to Jerusalem and learn about God and so we can walk in his paths. Well, that's not happening. Right now they want to bomb Jerusalem.
Well, verse 2, right, is the law of the world coming out of Zion? You see where it says Zion will be the source of instruction. Is that coming? I think it's coming.
And it says many nations. This isn't just like Jesus is in our hearts. I'm just getting tired of that. This is many nations. This is the world. Nations of the world will come and say, let's go up to the mountain and learn about God. And
Then the great the great verse 3 about the
taking their weapons and making plows out of them.
Tanks into tractors.
What was I going to say? The instruments of war turned into agricultural symbols.
Implements, yes. A
You know-
pruning hook, that's for picking fruit, right?
Right.
Off the trees and stuff.
Isaiah, like I was saying, this is basically a reiteration of Isaiah 2. And this passage in particular always strikes me because this is the one they have at the United Nations. They have this big statue with this guy with a sword.
Or a sword.
Sword, right? And then a big rock monument, and they have that quote, the United Nations, without the bit about the Lord God doing this. No, it's the United Nations that has done it and is doing it. I mean, it's quite blasphemous.
We have the new person here online. If I'm reading right, what I think it's a she, is saying, it's a spiritual, not physical place. I presume she's thinking that this whole
Zion?
thing, the mountain of the Lord, the word going out from Zion, all that is spiritual, because that's not what we believe. We believe this is a changed world. We believe this is earth. Jerusalem is Jerusalem, not a spiritual Jerusalem. But
Right, well, spiritual or not, so the nations of the world are recognizing that Jerusalem is spiritually the leader of the world? Is that, I mean...
I don't know if she understands about the kingdom on earth.
Okay.
It's just ethereal kingdom of... I'm not sure about that comment.
Right.
Maybe is it Gracie? I think that's what your name is. Maybe you could explain what you're asking there.
Yeah, I mean, even
because
if...
we in this group believe that when Jesus comes, he will set up his kingdom on the earth.
Right.
And that it won't be just a spiritual kingdom, it will be a physical kingdom on this planet, Earth.
But even if it's spiritual, because the word spiritual, what do you mean by spiritual?
Exactly.
But even if it is spiritual, the nation should be subject to one nation,
Yeah,
it
well,
says.
what is a spiritual nation?
Well, what is a spiritual whatever?
If you mean metaphorical, what does it mean?
Yeah, what
She
is the
says,
metaphor?
No, I meant that all nations worldwide will be going to physical Jerusalem. Good.
Right.
No, I meant that all nations worldwide will not be going to physical Jerusalem.
Okay.
It will not be going to physical Jerusalem.
Right. So only in their hearts or something.
But we believe that they will, actually.
Okay.
That once Jesus returns, he's going to be the king of the world, and there will be nations, and they
That
will go to
physically
Jerusalem
will pay
to
tribute.
learn.
And-
Because people that are in Bolivia might not know what all just happened. You know, when Jesus returned and set up his kingdom and his government on the earth in Jerusalem, people in Bolivia and Fiji and, northern Canada, might not know what's going on. And so they will go there, they will travel there to find out about this world. How will everyone around the world get to Jerusalem? There will be transportation.
Okay. Just to wrap this up,
It's a world like we have. It's hard to understand if you've never heard it.
I got sources there. Again, primary sources are important for this historicism, as you may appreciate, historicism from history. So I would recommend, my advice, again, because you have not believed anything I have said, like Gracie there, so check it out for yourself, if some things are not clear as well. And also go through our YouTube Abrahamic Movement channel. We've done many chats, Anthony and I. We've sat down and he's done a lot of teachings on this. Go to our focusonthekingdom.org. Go to articles. Anthony has done, he's got 40, 50 years of doing prophecy as well, although that doesn't make him right, but just check them out. So you got primary sources, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. If you got a good Catholic Bible like the Jerusalem Bible, which I highly recommend, the 1968 or the 1970 edition of Jerusalem Bible is excellent. They should have those 2 books there, because Catholic Bibles have all the so-called apocryphal Jewish works. You have the Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus. I didn't put there, but specifically chapters, I think it's 110 to 112. You can correct me if that deals specifically with the Maccabees. And Collins' Apocalypticism in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls have some very good information on this as well. And secondary sources there from, again, I was biased. Most of these guys, as you saw from some of the quotes I used, are not liberal in the way we described. They do sort of agree with a lot of the futurist views. So you got the famous Kyle and the Leech, Archer, Miller, and is that Wahlberg? There. And a good, always a good lexicon. Can go a long way. The BD, well, what's the BDPG? Anyway. All right, thanks everybody. We'll wrap it up here. And
okay. Daniel 2:44. This is a scripture that Gracie is referring to. And before I read,
the God of Gods.
Sarah, can you put a link to like one of your dad's books about the kingdom, or tell her how to, if she wants to understand what we believe about the kingdom.
In the days of those kings, the God
of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed,
and a kingdom that will not be left to another people. It will break in pieces and bring about the demise of all these kingdoms, but it will stand forever.
And so just because it says God of heaven doesn't mean the kingdom's in heaven. And I believe that is her reference for
That the king
believing that it's a spiritual kingdom.
is in heaven. Oh, I see.
Yet all the other things in Daniel previous to that were about these worldwide kingdoms.
Right.
The Medes and the Persians and the Greeks and the, what were the other ones? Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, So all those were world, ruling kingdoms on earth. And the fourth one, which, is from the beast and all that stuff, the fourth one is a future kingdom that's still on the earth.
Right.
It's not.
Daniel 7:27.
Yeah, let me also add Daniel 7:27.
Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. Their kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey them.
And Revelation 5.
10.
Okay, so
And
maybe I
Revelation.
misunderstood what she was saying.
Okay.
Said I always thought that God's holy mountain was the renewed earth and not just Jerusalem. Okay, maybe, yeah. Well, the mountain, there's scriptures about the mountain. The mountain arises, doesn't it? Comes up when Jesus returns. The mountain arises. It talks about the holy mountain.
Right.
And that is in Jerusalem, and that's where, you know, the new temple and Jesus will move from.
Anyway, despite that, though, those are good verses. Daniel 7:27. If you got an idea of going to heaven, and Revelation 5:10 is always good. We will reign on the earth, not on the heaven. All right, so we'll wrap it up. The time is upon us. You can stop the recording.
We're going to say a prayer first?
Yeah, we'll. So thanks, everybody.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you, Michelle.